The prosecutor arrives to question her about the accident, and of course it's Jae Chan. Hong Joo thinks back to how he'd held her in her dream, but in the present he's cold and formal. He's obviously skeptical of her account, that Yu Bum was the driver that night. Jae Chan tells her that Yu Bum testified the opposite, and we see him telling Jae Chan in flashback that he regretted letting Hong Joo drive in her worried state, when the roads were so slippery. You asshat. Hong Joo says he lied, but Chief Choi shows her the evidence that's in Yu Bum's favor, like her blood on the driver's side airbag, and the black box footage from the ambulance that shows her being rescued from the driver's seat, and Yu Bum being rescued from the passenger's side. She says that Yu Bum must have changed seats with her while she was unconscious, and wiped the airbag clean of his blood before putting hers on it. Jae Chan doesn't bat an eye and says that's just conjecture, and he believes in evidence over conjecture. She asks what she's supposed to do then, and he advises her to confess so he can deliberate the outcome, because the victim's family is pressing charges. Hong Joo tries calling Yu Bum, but of course he doesn't answer. All she can do is think about how she'd asked mom not to leave her all alone in this world, and the next thing we know, she's standing precariously on the edge of the hospital roof, as her aunt and Jae Chan try to talk her down. Jae Chan asks to talk things out, but Hong Joo doesn't see the point when she already told them what happened, but no one will believe her and nothing will change. Jae Chan calls out, "I'll believe you," and begins to walk toward her. Hong Joo says, "How nice would it be if this were a dream? If it were your dream, thank you for saying you'd believe me." A tear falls as she closes her eyes, and then she lets go. Jae Chan leaps forward and grabs her hand, but she slips through his grasp. He watches in horror as she falls away from him. And then he wakes up in bed. What? Wait, no seriously, what? It's the morning of Valentine's Day, 2016, oh thank God. And Jae Chan wonders what kind of a dream feels that real. He tells Little Bro that he had a weird dream about the neighbor, and Little Bro says he called it when Hung said she was rude that first day. That's the start of a typical rom-com. He asks what genre the dream was, and Jae Chan says she died in it, which puts a chill in the air. But they look out the window and Hong Joo's mom is alive and well, so Little Bro says it's obviously not coming true. He asks why Yu Bum appeared in the dream, and Jae Chan says he ran into him recently. Little Bro gets fired up and asks why he didn't punch his lights out and spit in his face. He decides that Hung's dream went McJang by romantically connecting the two people he hates most, Yu Bum and Hong Joo. Jae Chan takes note that today is Valentine's Day, and makes plans with Little Bro for after he picks up his new car. That morning he runs into Hong Joo at the bus stop, and decides to just ask if she knows Yu Bum. She's alarmed at that, thinking he's stalking her, to seduce her, PFFT, while he's alarmed that his dream is turning out to be not so crazy. She gets up to hail a cab and get away from him, so he says he knows it sounds crazy, but that she shouldn't meet Yu Bum today, or drive in the snow, or go anywhere near a car. He frantically tries to get her to listen, but she just storms off in the cab. Something about the way he talked makes her think of the cigarette man and how he hadn't listened to her warnings, but when she asks the cab driver if it's supposed to snow, he says the forecast is sunny. That night, Jae Chan is startled when everything happens like his dream. While waiting for his brother, he runs into Yu Bum instead, and Hong Joo arrives to meet him. Jae Chan scrambles to intervene and asks Yu Bum to buy him dinner right this instant, but Yu Bum says he has a date. This time, Hong Joo isn't even that surprised to run into Jae Chan, and without preamble he tells her to go home like he said earlier. She asks why, but Jae Chan doesn't have an answer. Yu Bum's guard goes up and he asks if he's the only one who doesn't understand what's going on, and leads Hong Joo away. Little Bro arrives, and Jae Chan gives up and agrees to go. But when they're about to leave, snow starts to fall and he can't shake the feeling that his dream is coming true. He says he has to check one last thing, and waits in the car. Just like in his dream, Hong Joo gets up in the middle of dinner, and at the same time mom leaves the coffee shop without her phone and the young man follows her out with it. Jae Chan watches as Yu Bum follows Hong Joo to her car, and takes her keys to drive. He realizes that Hong Joo was telling the truth in his dream, but by the time he runs out to stop them, they've driven away. He tells Little Bro to call the police and report the accident, which Little Bro calls insane because it hasn't happened. He wonders why Jae Chan is so concerned about this woman, but Jae Chan says he just doesn't want her to end up like him, back then. Little Bro thinks that Hung must just be overwhelmed with stress at seeing Yu Bum again. Jae Chan tries to listen to him and go on his way, except he can't get the image out of his head of Hong Joo falling out of his grasp to her death. He stares at his hand and decides to just do the crazy thing, and leaves his poor brother stranded in the parking lot. Yu Bum promises to protect Hong Joo and her mother just like in the dream, but this time he asks what that was with Jae Chan earlier. But before she can answer, a loud crash sends their car spinning through the intersection. They're both conscious but hazy, and Hong-ju looks up to see Jae-chan walking through the snow to get to her. He opens her door and asks if she's okay, and then in the distance we see the young man in the Batman cap standing just a few feet away from where Jae-chan's car rammed right into Hong-ju's at full speed. Jae-chan pulls her out of the car gently and asks if she isn't hurt, and then checks on Batman cap, who's stunned but fine. Yu-bum asks if he hit them, and Jae-chan says he skidded in the snow and lost control of his car. Yu-bum doesn't believe him though, and accuses him of hitting them on purpose, perhaps because he needs money. Jae-chan says that if it weren't for him, Yu-bum would have killed someone tonight. Yu-bum asks if this is because of that motorcycle accident. We flash back to 2003, the night that Jae-chan got caught for having a motorcycle. We learn that it was Yu-bum who had caused the accident, then a college student at Seoul University, and he'd told Jae-chan to take the fall. Jae-chan had insisted on telling the cops that Yu-bum was driving, so Yu-bum turned icy cold and said he'd testify the opposite, since it was his word against Jae-chan's. Then he collected his bag and just walked away, leaving Jae-chan to take the blame. In the present, Yu-bum calls him crazy, but Jae-chan insists that he did this to save them, because otherwise Yu-bum would have killed that man and framed Hong-ju for it, her mother would have died, and then she would have taken her own life like a fool. He says that Yu-bum is capable of that and worse, and Hong-ju listens to all of this in shock. Yu-bum asks who on earth would believe him and expects Hong-ju to agree, but she can't take her eyes off of Jae-chan. Jae-chan says in voiceover, "Who would believe me? That I saw you in my dream, that you were so sad in that dream that I came here to change it. No one would believe it, the future I changed." But of course, one person does. Hong-ju's eyes fill with tears and she takes a step forward. Just like in the opening dream, she marches right up to Jae-chan and throws her arms around him as she says that she believes him, because it's her, because she can. He's startled and tries to pull away, but she grabs tightly and won't let go as she says, "Thank you." He tentatively reaches up and pats her softly as he hugs her back.